This is Twit. So, this is an auspicious day in history.
It is.
The day after the 15th anniversary of Facebook.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. But more importantly, our hero is 5 years old today. I'm talking about... Who am I talking about? Mary Jo
The
Foley?
one, the only, Satya Nadella.
This is the 5th anniversary. I vividly remember our shows, and this went on for months, talking about who might be the CEO, who's the candidate. And they had, Meg Whitman, Alan Mulally.
Alan Mulally was my favorite choice.
Former CEO at Ford.
A lot of people thought it was going to be him.
And then it changed to Satya who?
But in hindsight...
No, in the early days, Stephen Elop was kind of a favorite of many. And then Mike Lowry.
I dream about Stephen Elop.
Yeah, there were so many.
He came in the Nokia acquisition. He was the Nokia.
Well, came back. He was originally from Microsoft. Remember, he ran their office business.
Right.
Kevin Turner even was bandied about at one point, who was the COO. And a lot of people at Microsoft freaked out about that because he was not that popular with the employees.
Well, him and his mustache are gone.
They're gone. Yep.
Can we say with some certainty that they actually, even though no one realized it at the time, did the best possible thing to hire Satya Nadella?
With Satya Nadella?
Yeah. All those other names sound so pathetic in hindsight.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what the big difference is between him and most of them is that they are either old guard Microsoft, right? Which is really what the company didn't need and doesn't need.
Right.
Or just old guard CEO types, which, we'll never really know.
Yeah. Alan Mulally's not going to really cleverly say, it's time to go to the web.
He could have been like the Gil Amelio of
exactly.
Microsoft.
I think many of those that you described.
Yeah, just from outside the industry.
Yeah. I mean, how do you put somebody in charge of Microsoft who's never worked in tech?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we have Office and Office 365. It's like Ford and Mercury kind of.
Exactly.
It's just, think of it that way.
But you know what? I feel like I remember the day they announced Satya Nadella was going to be the CEO, which was February 4th. My first thought was, oh, you know what? It's going to be the same old, same old. I really did think that because he had been there already 20 plus years and he wasn't a real household name, but I was thinking, okay, what's he really going to do to shake things up? He's been here too long. He's already kind of accepted the way things are, but that was so not true.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Well, but you know what? Nobody outside the company knew him.
Right.
It was impossible for you or anyone else to have guessed the change agent that this guy would be, and just his whole life perspective that has permeated the company is something no one knew anything about. You never would have heard about any of that stuff if he was running Bing or, an executive on the server team or whatever he might have done.
Do you think internally they knew though? I mean, there must have been people internally who said,
knew him
this
internally.
guy's the right guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've been promoting him up through the ranks, and his last job, I think, was head of server and cloud. So they knew he had the potential to do this, right?
It's possible there was evidence of this in his own organization at the time. It's equally likely that there was I don't know if it took the form of an actual questionnaire, but obviously you go through the process of trying to become CEO, and there's obviously a back and forth that occurs, and I think what is your worldview? How would you change Microsoft? That has to have been part of it. And I think they were just intrigued by his responses to those kinds of questions.
Yeah. You want to hear a weird coincidence? So, Ballmer had already announced he was leaving. Like that was already done. And so I was doing a story about, I was the last person to get Steve Ballmer to interview him. And so what they did was they had me go around and interview a bunch of people who had been his direct reports. And I talked to all different people in the organization. And the last person they had me talk to was Nadella. This was in 2013, so the year before he took over. And I kind of felt in hindsight like it was an audition in a way. Not with me, making the choice, but
they were saying, how do you handle the press?
Yeah, let's see what he does here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So my personal connection to this is that one of my best friends at Microsoft was Satya Nadella's speechwriter.
Oh, wow.
And Ward. And when he became CEO, I was like, here we go, baby, I'm in. And Ward was no longer his speechwriter.
Did you want to become Satya Nadella's speechwriter, or did you just think, oh, here?
No, I figured I have a direct line to the CEO. Yeah. This is going to be amazing. And of course, all the people who were around him in the server biz or whatever were out, because now you're doing this from the corporate level.
Time. Now it's big time. Yeah. Chris Capocella's going to get some say in this.
Yeah.
And they knew Ward was a completely leaky sieve to Paul Thurrott, so. You cost him his job. I don't want to say anything, but
thank you for bringing that up. I probably did actually.
No, I feel like he wanted to retire.
He ended up leaving Microsoft, but that had nothing to do with it. He was just
He, like many, he was like, I can leave.
It's I've been watching PBS's Victoria, all about Queen Victoria, and it's kind of like Queen Victoria, where now you're playing in the big leagues. You got it's all different. You got a nice new robe to wear. You got a better hat.
I picture Queen Victoria's England as being like the Addams Family, where everything's kind of black and it looked like wrought iron.
That was after Albert died. Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, I don't want to go into Queen Victoria's story because it's not really germane. But but it must be, or going from being a governor to the president or whatever. It's got to be an interesting transition.
I know.
And Nadella's handled it like superbly. He took, it was really because of what was his very first act that we know of.
His first act was bringing Office to iPad. Like that was one of his biggest.
Even before that. He killed the Surface Mini.
Oh yeah, he did that too.
Wasn't that his very first thing out of the door? He says, "Oh, and by the way, we're not doing that, and I hate Nokia."
Right. So here's the thing. So I would say those are very the iPad Office thing was obviously a public thing, right? So and I'm sure to the world that was oh God, this is not Ballmer's Microsoft.
It was a shot across the bow.
They didn't just invent it when Nadella showed up.
Yeah.
No, that was Ballmer's decision to make that happen. Yeah. And then Nadella got to execute it, right?
But it's like when you go to prison. I don't know if you've ever been to prison.
But please
you got to establish your dominance right at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you go to the
normally you shiv someone, but he decided to.
Instead of shivving someone, he shivved the Surface Mini.
Right.
But I'm kind of being facetious, but I'm not really, because he was very
very much against it.
But he was also very decisive from the beginning. He didn't say, let me get the hang of the lay of the land here for a couple of months. He went in there and said,
what do they call it when you he had a mandate, right? And I think none of this stuff was a surprise to anybody, right? So his feelings about Nokia, his feelings about Surface Mini, whatever. I think these things were well understood. Before he showed up.
And when they hired him, they knew. Being bored, I guess.
I think, Mike, this is honestly as much credit as we will and should give Satya Nadella for what he's done. I think that Microsoft institutionally deserves a lot more credit for understanding the position it was in and how it needed to change, and that a guy like him was necessary to drive that change, that Bill Gates coming back, or some guy who had been at the company for 18 years, very visible, obviously in line to be CEO, was not the right way, that they couldn't do that. That one of the issues with Steve Ballmer is that he was the George H.W. Bush of that thing, where he was going to continue the tradition of the previous guy. And
that wasn't completely a mistake. To be fair to Ballmer, the company did very well.
Oh no, of course. I didn't mean it like that. But when you want to but the world has changed now. So it's years down the road. Everything's changed.
No, I agree.
Microsoft is going to slowly disappear.
And Bill's not coming back, baby. So let's do something new.
You have to give them credit for doing this. Most companies can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
This is a case study in business school now.
It is. It should be. If it isn't,
be. It's such a rare thing. You got Steve Jobs coming back to Apple, and you've got Microsoft pivoting, basically, turning its back on its traditional money makers to go to the cloud.
Compare it to Apple, right? Apple was ready to go out of business. Steve Jobs kind of came back and then really came back, and he was able to institute great change at Apple because there was no alternative. They were going away. Microsoft had billions and billions of dollars and huge businesses and would not be disappearing for decades to come. But they still understood that they needed to make this change and made it. It is super impressive. It really, really is. Because they were on a path to become irrelevant over time. Not immediately. Things like that don't happen quickly. But for Microsoft to make that dramatic of a change when they made it is, I think it's a triumph.